November 22, 1963. The sun blazed over Dallas, Texas, illuminating a city unaware that it was about to witness one of the most defining and controversial events in modern American history. Crowds lined the streets, waving flags and craning their necks to catch a glimpse of President John Fitzgerald Kennedy as he rode in an open-top motorcade in seconds. Gunfire shattered the cheers. The President of the United States had been struck down in the heart of a public spectacle, leaving the nation in shock. Officially, the story is simple. Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. A lone gunman, no accomplices, no hidden agendas. Case closed. Yet the official narrative fails to account for the intricate web of forces surrounding this tragedy. Kennedy's assassination was not merely a single act of violence. It was a collision of political, financial, and clandestine powers converging in a deadly, perfectly timed act. The real question is not just who fired the shots, but why the president was a target in the first place. Lee Harvey Oswald, a former U.S. Marine, defected to the Soviet Union after his service. During his time there, he absorbed Marxist ideologies and lived under the shadow of the Cold War's tension. He eventually returned to the United States, seemingly an ordinary man with an extraordinary narrative. On November 22, Oswald allegedly climbed to the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository, taking aim at President Kennedy. 3 shots fired. The president struck down. The nation plunged into mourning. The official story depicts Oswald as a lone wolf, acting without influence. Yet cracks in this narrative began immediately. Oswald himself proclaimed, "I am a patsy," insisting he was being set up. Before he could defend himself in court or provide answers, he was shot and killed on live television by Jack Ruby, a nightclub owner with known mob ties. The key witness was silenced, leaving the world with a story that felt incomplete and unsatisfying. Jack Ruby, far from a random actor, was deeply embedded in Dallas nightlife and had connections to organized crime. His ability to access Oswald under federal surveillance raises questions that remain unresolved. Ruby claimed temporary insanity following the shooting, and he was imprisoned. He died in jail before revealing the full truth of his motivations or connections. This act of silencing the only person who could testify in Oswald's defense only deepened public suspicion and fueled decades of conspiracy theories. One witness, one story, forever closed. Powerful assassinations are rarely about ideology alone. Money often lies at the heart of historical intrigue. The Federal Reserve, a quasi-private institution, controlled the issuance of US currency. While appearing governmental, it held significant private influence, dominated by financial dynasties like the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, and J.P. Morgan. President Kennedy's 1963 executive order authorized the issuance of silver-backed currency, challenging the dominance of private banking interests and asserting government control over money creation. This bold move threatened the entrenched power of the financial elite, who had long operated above and beyond governmental authority. Within months, Kennedy was assassinated. Whether coincidence or consequence, the timing remained suspicious. Kennedy's monetary reforms were quietly reversed after his death, erasing the potential for a shift in the balance of power. The Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961 remains one of the most notorious CIA failures in history. Designed to overthrow Fidel Castro, the operation relied on approximately 1,500 Cuban exiles trained and armed by the agency. The mission failed catastrophically, humiliating the U.S. on a global stage. President Kennedy held the CIA accountable, openly criticizing the agency and its leaders. He dismissed Director Allen Dulles and Deputy Director Charles Cabell, signaling his intent to curtail the agency's unchecked power. Yet in a twist of historical irony, Allen Dulles later served on the Warren Commission tasked with investigating Kennedy's assassination. Cabell's brother held a high-ranking position in Dallas, the very city of the shooting. The pieces begin to hint at a web far more complex than a single gunman. Kennedy's attempts to rein in a rogue intelligence agency may have sealed his fate, but history leaves us only questions. When John F. Kennedy entered the White House, his younger brother Robert Kennedy became Attorney General. Unlike many political appointments of the era, Robert Kennedy did not treat the position as symbolic. He treated it as a battlefield. At the time, organized crime in the United States had its fingers deep inside labor unions, shipping ports, construction contracts, and local governments. For decades, the mafia operated with near impunity, protected by bribery, intimidation, and political favors. Robert Kennedy shattered this unspoken agreement. He dramatically increased prosecutions against organized crime figures, wiretaps multiplied, indictments followed. High-profile mob bosses who had lived comfortably in the shadows suddenly found themselves under relentless pressure. To the mafia, this was betrayal. The Kennedys had benefited directly or indirectly from organized crime support during election campaigns. Now, the same family was threatening the survival of the criminal underworld. Several mafia figures later hinted that John F. Kennedy's death was not unexpected. In their worldview, power was transactional. Break the deal, face the consequences. The early 1960s were a period of extreme tension. The Cold War was not a distant geopolitical chess match, it was a daily fear. Nuclear annihilation felt possible at any moment. Kennedy had narrowly navigated the Cuban Missile Crisis, resisting pressure from military leaders who urged full-scale invasion. His restraint saved millions of lives but earned him enemies within the Pentagon and defense industry. Military contractors thrived on conflict. War meant contracts, profits, expansion. Kennedy's reluctance to escalate tensions, particularly his early moves to reconsider involvement in Vietnam, threatened this ecosystem. To some, Kennedy appeared weak. To others, dangerously unpredictable. Either way, he was becoming isolated among powerful institutions accustomed to endless war. In the aftermath of the assassination, President Lyndon B. Johnson established the Warren Commission to investigate Kennedy's death. Its conclusion was definitive. Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, but critics quickly raised concerns. Witness testimonies were ignored or altered. Physical evidence was mishandled. Medical reports conflicted with eyewitness accounts. Most controversially, Alan Dullister, former CIA director fired by Kennedy, was appointed to the commission. This decision alone cast a long shadow over the findings. Was the commission designed to uncover the truth, or to preserve stability by preventing public outrage? In 1963, television was becoming the dominant medium. Americans watched the assassination, Oswald's murder, and the unfolding investigation from their living rooms. The media played a crucial role in shaping perception. Questioning the official narrative was often dismissed as unpatriotic or dangerous during a time of Cold War paranoia. Journalists who pursued alternative explanations faced professional backlash. Some stories never reached print. Silence became safer than curiosity. Kennedy's death sent shockwaves far beyond American borders. Allies questioned our stability. Adversaries reassessed American resolve. Within months, U.S. policy shifted. Vietnam escalated. Intelligence agencies expanded their reach. Financial institutions regained unquestioned authority. The message was unmistakable. The system had survived and it would protect itself at all costs. To understand the assassination, one must understand Lee Harvey Oswald beyond the label of lone gunman. Oswald's life was marked by instability from an early age. He grew up without a father, moved constantly, and struggled to form lasting relationships. Authority figures frustrated him, yet he desperately sought their approval. During his time in the U.S. Marines, Oswald demonstrated above-average marksmanship, contradicting later claims that he lacked the skill to carry out the assassination. He was disciplined, but also argumentative. Fellow Marines described him as intense, withdrawn, and obsessed with politics. Oswald's defection to the Soviet Union was not the act of a confused drifter, it was a calculated ideological move. Yet even in the USSR he failed to belong. Disillusioned, he returned to the United States with a Russian wife, under circumstances that raised eyebrows within intelligence circles. Despite Cold War paranoia, Oswald faced little resistance, re-entering the US, no serious interrogation, no long-term surveillance. For a former defector, this was highly unusual. Oswald's movements before the assassination placed him near known intelligence asset. His interactions with pro-Castro and anti-Castro groups alike suggested contradictions that made little sense for a committed ideologue. Some researchers argue Oswald functioned as a low-level intelligence asset, useful, expendable, and deniable. Whether CIA, FBI, or another agency, the question remains, why was Oswald repeatedly present at geopolitical flashpoints? If Oswald was being monitored, why was he allowed to roam freely in Dallas days before the assassination? And if he was not monitored, how did the intelligence community overlook such a volatile figure? Dealey Plaza was not an accident of geography. It was a controlled environment, open sightlines, limited escape routes, and minimal security. Witnesses reported shots from multiple directions. Some heard gunfire from the grassy knoll. Others described smoke, movement, and confusion inconsistent with a single shooter. The chaos lasted seconds, but its consequences reshaped history. Evidence was quickly removed. The limousine was cleaned. The crime scene altered. In any modern investigation, such actions would be considered unforgivable. To support the long gunman conclusion, investigators introduced the magic bullet theory. According to this explanation, a single bullet entered Kennedy's back, exited his throat, changed direction multiple times, and wounded Governor Connolly in several places. Ballistics experts and medical professionals have long questioned this theory. The bullet allegedly responsible was found nearly pristine. For many, this theory symbolizes the lengths to which officials went to preserve a predetermined conclusion. Within hours of Kennedy's death, Lyndon B. Johnson was sworn in as president aboard Air Force One. The transition of power was swift, absolute, and unquestioned. Johnson's political career had been faltering. Allegations of corruption loomed, yet overnight, he inherited the presidency and with it, control over the investigation. While no definitive proof links Johnson directly to the assassination, his immediate consolidation of power and policy reversals raise uncomfortable questions. History rarely favors coincidence. Throughout the early 1960s, the CIA was deeply entangled with organized crime in its efforts to eliminate Fidel Castro. Declassified documents and later testimonies revealed that the agency quietly collaborated with mafia figures who had lost lucrative casinos and businesses after Castro's revolution. For the mafia, Castro was a personal enemy. For the CIA, he was a geopolitical threat. Their interests aligned, and that alignment produced secret operations, deniable assets, and a culture where legality no longer mattered. John F. Kennedy inherited these operations and recoiled from them. He feared escalation, international backlash, and moral decay. When he pulled back support and demanded oversight, he disrupted a system that thrived on secrecy and autonomy. To those embedded in this shadow world, Kennedy was no longer a partner. He was an obstacle. In the years following the assassination, dozens of individuals connected to the case died under unusual circumstances. Some were witnesses in Dealey Plaza, others were law enforcement officers, journalists, or associates of Oswald and Ruby. Officially, these deaths were coincidences, heart attacks, car accidents, suicides, but the statistical concentration disturbed even skeptical observers. Fear spread quietly. People stopped talking. Others recanted earlier statements. Silence became a form of survival. Kennedy's autopsy was conducted under extraordinary pressure. Military officials oversaw the process. Photographs and X-rays were classified. Doctors later contradicted each other in sworn testimony. Some medical professionals present that night claimed the head wound indicated a shot from the front, contradicting the long gunman theory. Others changed their statements years later. Evidence was missing. Notes disappeared. The body had been altered. In any other murder investigation, such irregularities would collapse the case. Kennedy privately questioned America's involvement in Vietnam. He approved early troop withdrawals and resisted pressure from military advisors demanding escalation. After his death, policy reversed almost immediately. Troop numbers exploded. Defense contracts soared. The war machine roared to life. For those who profited from perpetual conflict, Kennedy's restraint was dangerous. His absence changed everything. Decades later, government files were partially released, but many remained redacted. Others were delayed repeatedly. Each release answered minor questions while raising larger ones. Names were missing. Pages were blacked out. Key years were absent. Transparency was promised. Truth was postponed. Kennedy's death was not just the removal of a man, it was a message to future presidents, to reformers, to anyone who dared challenge entrenched power. Presidents after Kennedy learned to move carefully. Intelligence agencies expanded. Financial institutions solidified control. War became routine. The system had spoken. Official history tells us that Lee Harvey Oswald killed John F. Kennedy alone. That story is simple, comforting, convenient. But history, when examined closely, rarely conforms to simplicity. Kennedy challenged banks. He restrained intelligence agencies. He resisted endless war. He disrupted criminal alliances. And then he was removed. Perhaps we will never know every detail. Perhaps the full truth died with those who carried it. But one lesson remains clear. Power protects itself, and those who threaten it often pay the ultimate price. John F. Kennedy's assassination was not the end of a presidency. It was the beginning of an era defined by secrecy, fear, and unanswered questions, and those questions still echo today. This is the part history books never teach. John F. Kennedy was not just assassinated, He was removed. Removed because he challenged banks that printed money without accountability. Removed because he questioned intelligence agencies that operated above the law. Removed because he resisted wars that generated endless profit. Removed because he believed that the President of the United States should control power, not be controlled by it. After Kennedy died, notice what never happened again. No president seriously challenged the Federal Reserve. No president openly threatened to dismantle the CIA. No president truly resisted the military-industrial complex. They learned that power has boundaries, and crossing them has consequences. The official story tells you to focus on Lee Harvey Oswald, on a rifle, on a window, on a single man, because as long as you argue about who pulled the trigger, you never ask who designed the system where pulling it was possible. Kennedy's assassination was not a mystery to be solved. It was a warning to be remembered, a warning that says this: you can win an election, you can become president, you can lead a nation, but if you threaten the wrong interests, you will not finish your journey. History did not forget Kennedy. It learned from him. And the world you live in today, a world of endless wars, untouchable institutions, secret files, and manufactured truths, is the result. This was not the end of John F. Kennedy. This was the moment power reminded humanity who truly rules. And the most terrifying part, it worked.